So tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about finding your beginning team. And usually that starts with your co-founders and your advisors. A lot of what I say, though, really applies to your first employees, too, who honestly take a huge risk. So I'm going to talk, but if you have questions, you can raise your hand in the middle, and we'll have a conversation instead of me talking at you. In case you don't know, by the way, FounderDating is the largest online network of entrepreneurs and advisors. It's like LinkedIn for entrepreneurs. We recently were acquired by a company called OneVest, which does equity crowdfunding, so it's from founding to funding. And actually, I don't work there anymore. But I still know a lot about it, and the topic is really not FounderDating, but actually how you build this team. So just for, oh, and this presentation has a lot of North American pop culture references, so if they fall down, I apologize. So I live in San Francisco, but I grew up in Detroit, so I have to pay homage to some of my hometown heroes. So just by show of hands, how many of you have a startup already? Okay. And of those people, how many have a co-founder? Okay. And how many people think they are wanting to start a company and think they need a co-founder? Okay. Yeah. You do need one. If you don't believe me, then we can talk after. Okay. So this is what you don't know. You are here. You literally don't know a ridiculous amount. You can't even possibly imagine what you don't know. There's an old saying, you don't know what you don't know, but one thing I can guarantee is it's a lot. It's vast. So part of the reason that you want to build a founding team, and we can get into what the right number is because you need to fill those knowledge gaps. You need people who can do things that you can't do. And when you think about who that is, a lot of people think about who they get along with best and who they naturally are attracted to. And typically we like people like us, and that's fine for having coffee. But for your co-founder, you don't want you. You don't want the clone of you. That's not what you're looking for. You want someone who is a partner and who is different than you in the important ways. So that might be in skill sets. That might be in when you are high, he's low, and when you're low, she's high. Whatever it is, but you need to look for the right areas where you're complementing each other. The second big mistake we see people making is they look for just that. They just look for the skills. So how many of you are business people looking for an engineer? Okay, that's not so bad. How many of you are engineers? Oh, that's, okay, fabulous, okay. But what happens is a lot of times people will look for just the skill set. So, you hear people say this all the time, I need an engineer. I need someone to build this. And that's not very compelling. That's like asking, anyway, I won't make that joke. But you want someone who's your partner. You need to you're going into battle together. So you need someone who you treat as a partner, someone who you can weather the storms with, someone who you're going to bounce ideas off of, someone who's going to calm you down when you need to be calmed down, someone who's you're going to calm down when they need to be calmed down, etc. You don't want someone like this. It's not the person where you say, I have everything figured out, you just build it. Or I built it, just go fundraise for us. That's not a co-founder. That's a consultant. And there's a really big difference. Really big. So again, so the focus should be on the person and not on the idea. And a good friend of mine who used to be an ambassador for the company and ran engineering at Zappos and now has his own startup, and he's an engineer. This is a direct quote from him. When I get an email pitching me an idea, I hear, I need someone to build my idea. I'm not going to pay you, but you can have some equity. That's not attractive to me. I have a LinkedIn account full of spam from recruiters, developer groups I belong to get spammed by people like this as well. I don't want to work on a wine app. I want to work with awesome people, and if the idea we pick is a wine app, so be it. Does this make sense? People don't go in and just hard sell your idea, because that, number one, doesn't feel like a partner. And number two, your idea is probably going to change. There's not that many things I would guarantee, but I will guarantee that your idea will change either in iterations or completely. I mean, you hear all the time stories of, companies that were born out of just completely flailing companies. Slack, not meant to be Slack, started as a completely different thing. Instagram started as a completely different thing. But they liked each other, they got along with each other, they wanted to stay with each other. So very rarely when you hear someone and you say, oh, how did you guys decide to work together? Rarely does someone say, oh, they really hard sold me on the idea. That's not what people say. And when you fall in love with the idea and the idea changes, you are not in a great place. So, what should you look for in a co-founder? And these are really important acronyms, so apologies if this offends anyone. Does anyone know what these acronyms stand for? Okay. GSD is get shit done, and FSO is figure shit out. And those are the most important things in a co-founder. And they're actually some of the most important things in your early employees as well. I don't care if you're the smartest in your field. If you don't have these two things, you're not a good founder. Because again, if we go back to that desert slide, there's just a huge, huge, huge area that you don't know. There's just knowledge missing. And you're gonna have to figure stuff out. You're gonna have to do things you have never done before. You're not just coming into something to do the thing that you've been good at all along. There's so many things that founders have to do, and a lot of them suck, to be honest. Like, it's not fun to deal with the lawyers. It's not fun to do, taxes. It's not fun to necessarily, go cold call 100 people. But you do that stuff. And you want to be with someone that when you sit there and you divide responsibilities, they say, I'm going to do this even though I don't know how to do it, that you say, you know what? I'm 100% confident, I'm 200% confident that this person is going to figure it out and they're going to get it done. You don't want in the back of your head to be like, ugh, God, I don't know if she's going to do that. That's a terrible way to feel. You need to walk away, because you have so much to do also. You need to walk away and say, yeah, that's going to get done. I don't exactly know how, but I have total confidence that that's going to get done. This is especially important for engineers, because I think on the flip side, it's actually important for everyone, but on the flip side, it's very hard to give business people a test and say are they a good business person? You don't go up to the whiteboard and solve a problem as a business person. It's just, you do, but it's just not the same thing. You need to know this. You need to talk to people they've worked with. You need to work with them and figure out if this is there. This is literally the most important thing. If I only showed you one slide tonight, it would be this. The other important thing, and I say this to everyone, is this is your first sales and marketing job. Task. Closing a co-founder is your first thing, because chances are you have very little, maybe nothing. Maybe you have a landing page, maybe you have an idea, maybe you did a little validation, but you're basically telling someone to leave whatever they're doing, which even if it isn't secure is way more secure than what you're offering, to build something in your head or that you guys decided on together, and take a huge leap with you. That's actually a little bit crazy. And by the way, the chances of success are like 9%. So this is a sales and marketing job. And for anyone who doesn't understand the value of the business side, this is why it's important. Every new hire is another one. Recruiting is a sales and marketing job. And I don't mean that in like a scammy way, like you're lying to them. I mean it in a, like, you have to make them believe. You have to get them excited. Because there's like not that much to hang on to. And there's always better offers. There's always more money. Always. Never as a startup compete on money. There's always more money. I mean, your equity is, if you really want to be honest, worth nothing. So it's belief. It's passion. It's like you sold someone. And you need to be able to do that in like a meaningful way. You need to be able to get people to join you. And so the first thing means that you need to feel 100% confident. And one thing that I ask every entrepreneur I ever meet with, and I was doing office hours here yesterday and again tomorrow, and I asked too, is like, why do you want to do this for the next 10 years? And actually someone said, oh, I don't. And I was like, what? This is a 10-year life cycle. This is not 2-3 years and I'm going to flip it. Like, if you think like that, you will fail. You need to say to yourself, like, is this the thing I want to do for the next decade? If you don't make other people jump ship and come on board with you. So first ask yourself that, and then make sure you have a really good answer to tell people why they should want to do it with you as well. And it's not just about the idea, it's also about why you want to solve a problem, why you want to manage a company. Okay, so we talked about what to look for, we talked about why you need a co-founder, so like, where should you start? So this sounds super obvious, I know, but everybody always asks me, like, how do you know? How do you know if you can work with someone? There's no one test, but you should work with them. That's the first thing I say to everyone. Like, if you've never worked together, don't decide you're co-founders. Either meet on nights and weekends and have a side project. Meet on nights and weekends and work on the idea that you have together. Have a trial period of 90 days. Go to hackathons together. I'm not a huge fan of just nights and weekends on like a not so important project, because you can't imitate the stress of a startup. And so you want to go to situations where there's like high stress. Even hackathons, people get super into it. And so you want to go to a place where there's high stress. It shouldn't be like, oh, do you want to do this or this with the product? And someone's like, I don't really care. No, you should simulate situations where you care and have a fight and disagree and then try to make it work. The second thing, and it's just amazing how many people don't do this, but ask questions. Ask like a lot of questions. I wrote a blog post years ago. If you Google questions to ask potential co-founders, it's the first result, because so many people ask me this question. And there's a lot of questions on it. Yeah, don't ask them all, like don't meet and ask them all in one sitting. It's not an interview process. It's topics to cover. So you need to know why someone wants to start a company. What's their risk profile? When can they leave their job? How big a company do they want to build? Do you want to build a lifestyle company and they want to build $1 billion IPO exit? Those are two very different things. Probably shouldn't start a company together. Like, what kind of culture do you want to build? You think that these are things that you figure out later, but if you don't agree now, you'll break up later. And co-founder breakups, while normal, are a huge, huge reason that companies fail. So you gotta ask questions. And most of the questions should not be, as I said, about how good you are at a certain skill. You should ask that. You should know that. But you learn that also from working with each other and references. You should ask to talk to people that they've worked with. You should, like anyone you would hire, you should reach out to people that they've worked with. You shouldn't just take their references, right? You would never do that. And this is a much, much bigger decision. So ask a lot of questions. And then the third thing, and I already mentioned this, is you need to fight and have arguments. And if you don't think this is important, just think about any relationship you've ever had and where it fell apart and where it got stronger. Like, you're potentially going to spend more time with this person than anyone else on earth, including your partner, including your kids. I'm sad to say, but it's true. And you will have arguments. You will disagree on things. So you need to know when that happens, what's going to be the end result. Are we going to be able to get over it? Are we going to sit for 3 days, waste 3 days of time every time we have an argument? Or are we going to agree to disagree and move on? And in a startup, time is actually your greatest resource, right? You don't have more money than big companies, not actually smarter than them, even though we all like to think we are. You can experiment and you can move fast. Those are your greatest resources. And so if every time you disagree on something, you spend 2 days sulking and not getting something done, once that's no big deal, but compounded, that's a really big deal. You're slowed down. And then you bring on team members and they see you disagreeing and they see you guys not doing stuff when that happens, and then they start questioning things. So you really need to know if you can do this. Can you fight and make up quickly? How you fight, how you disagree is actually really important. I didn't learn this till much later on. Okay, so that's co-founders. It's actually all early team members, to be honest, because it's just so early. Everyone's taking such a big risk. Your earliest team members maybe don't need to be as big of athletes as your co-founder, but you do need to make sure that they're not going to sit there and say, that's not my job. Anyone who says that is not an early employee anywhere. Before I move on to advisors, any questions?
My question is, you've just said that we have to question the other partner before deciding if that's a good person or not. Let's say that you have 20 questions in your blog article. Do we have to have a yes on the 20 question, or there is a 7 out of 10 yes, or,
okay.
Or the top 3?
Yeah. The answer is, and I'm sure it'll be not fulfilling for you, but it depends. First of all, they're not yes or no questions, and there's no scoring system. Maybe I should do that, but it really depends on what matters to you. What matters to me and how I work is different than what matters to you. For instance, I could not have a remote co-founder. I just can't do it. I know it about myself. I don't work well remotely, but I especially don't work well remotely with my partners. You might feel totally differently, right? Those are personal preferences, but you need to be honest with yourself. So you need to decide, and we call it FounderDating. It's not meant to be funny. It is a relationship, and you need to date. You need to figure out what your deal breakers are and what's important to you. So the questions are not yes or no questions. They're sort of short answer essays, and you need to decide what's right for you. And it's good to look down the questions also, so you can ask yourself, hey, what do I want here? What is important to me? But nothing is a replacement for actually working with someone and figuring out, because just as an example, you could work with someone and they, type really loudly and it drives you nuts and you can't work with them. I don't know. Wouldn't bother me, but you have to decide what your deal breakers are. Okay. Why do I need advisors? So there's really 3 kinds of roles advisors play, and they're not mutually exclusive. So someone can be any or all. They at least have to be one. It's great if they're 2. It's rare if they're 3, but obviously that's great. The reason I added this to the presentation is because I think entrepreneurs typically mismanage relationships with advisors. I did when I was starting out, and this is sort of what I learned. So there's really 3 roles. One is consigliere. Like, they're the person that when it's not your co-founder that you call. Because you're not going to call your board members until you solve it, typically, or it's really bad. And usually this is someone who's been high up before, that you trust, that you have an amazing rapport with. Because you're really telling them, you know, the guts of things that are going on. Someone's about to quit. You need to close on a candidate, but you don't have the fundraising closed yet. You know, you're just as the person that you can really talk things through with. You know, you only know that if you've done it before. It doesn't just happen. But I would say every single founder should have at least one person like this. And typically, I think you should have a group of people, but that's another talk and conversation. Okay, so the second is what we call SMEs, subject matter experts. This is what most people do. They say, oh, we need help with product. I want to find someone good at product. We need help with design. I'll show it to this design person. Great, perfect. There's nothing wrong with that, but it'd be cool if this person had like a couple other things that they did. In particular, they're a connector. So if you have a design advisor, okay, and they're amazing at design, they give you feedback on design, that's great, but they should also be able to connect you to other designers because you need to hire them. A design advisor doesn't replace the person you need designing your product or people. So they should be not only a connector, but let me take it back. They should be not only able to connect you, but willing. And there's a really big difference. Saying you know someone and actually connecting people are 2 different things that people often mix up. I have a large network. Am I willing to introduce you? And it should be one of your first asks. When advisors connecting you to people is probably one of the most valuable things that they can do. So I think SMEs are great unless they're like geniuses in a field. And I think in certain fields you can have this NLP, AI. I think there are people that you just want, right? Like we were building a recommendation engine. We had an advisor who built the first recommendation engine for Match. That was just, we really needed that. And that was important. That said, he was willing to introduce us to other people that he worked with. So this is really important. If you just have an advisor who's a subject matter expert, it's okay. But if you have one that is a subject matter expert that's going to connect you, that's much better. And if they're also a consigliere, that's amazing. So the trifecta is all 3, but that's rare. The other thing about connectors is that they can connect you to fundraising, and they can connect you to potential clients, especially if you're a SaaS play. And again, you need to differentiate between having a network and willing to introduce you. 2 totally different things. They could be the CEO of a major company. That doesn't mean they're willing to introduce you to people. So the way to know is to ask for a couple early. That should be easy. They should be willing to do that. It's very quick. Obviously give them a template. So these are all sort of the roles of advisors. Okay, so I get emails all the time, both on our platform and other places, like, hey, will you be our advisor? No, I don't even know you. I'm not going to be your advisor. That's a ridiculous email. Okay, so first you want to identify someone. You need to identify, what you need in an advisor. You can see the previous slides. Once you do that, get an introduction. Find a way to get a warm introduction. Cold emails kind of suck. And quite frankly, unless you're just in a totally different industry and you have no one in totally different geographies, you should be able to find a connection in common. Because when I get an email that says, hey, will you meet this person from a friend of mine, that's so different than, hi, will you advise me? I mean, just night and day difference. So number one, get an intro. If you can't get an intro, get some kind of social proof in there. It looks like we have these people in common. By the way, this is like 101 on writing business emails in general, but especially for advisors. Social proof, number one, in the first line. I actually put it in my title, like, Jessica sent me. Oh, Jessica, I know Jessica. Okay. Then, please don't tell me you want me to be your advisor. Please tell me what you noticed about me. And there's two reasons. One is, I want to know why me. Like, why are you sending an email to me? Did you just like copy paste a template and send it to 55 people? Because that's pretty transparent and I don't want to advise you. I don't even want to meet with you. The second part is, I want to know that you like took the time to do your homework, that you're the kind of person that goes like the little extra step and says, oh, I really need someone with these kind of skill sets, with this kind of background. I talked to people, that's what they said. And I looked at your background, you have this. Can we have a coffee? That's it. I'm not asking you to like know my whole history and childhood. I just want to know that you like it looked at my LinkedIn. Okay. The third, and this is where everybody makes a mistake. Show advisors that you value them. So this is what typically happens. You meet someone, there's two scenarios. You meet someone, you get an introduction. Great, you're on your way. You keep meeting with them. You keep asking them for things. You don't give them anything. You don't formalize the relationship. And why is that bothersome? It's not because advisors make so much money off their equity. It's like 0.1 to 0.5%. So it's not because they're planning on getting rich, and obviously it's a long time horizon. It's because I want to know that you value me. I want to know that my time is valuable to you. And I want our incentives to be aligned. I'm not going to keep doing work for you. I'm not going to keep sending you intros. I'm not going to keep giving you advice if you can't at least give me that small amount of equity. So show me that you value me. I don't know how it is in France, but in the US, advisor agreements are literally can be found online. They're 2 pages, they're 2 years, they're very standard. The like range you give in equity is very small. You can ask anyone. It's very standard. So you can draw in the numbers. You don't need a lawyer. It's very simple. Just so many people don't want to have the conversation. It's like awkward. I don't know why, but it is. And it's awkward for the advisor to ask too. And instead what they do is they just sort of drop off and stop answering your emails. So if that's happening, that's why. When should you do this? So I have a 3-meeting rule. If I've met with you 3 times, after that, I'm going to have this conversation. I love helping entrepreneurs. I think it's super interesting. I'm having office hours here tomorrow. I think companies that are in areas I don't know about are super interesting. But I can't spend all my time on that. And I need a way to prioritize. So you need to, again, value my time. And so if I have 15 things to do and we haven't formalized an agreement, you're number 16. You're off my priority list. I have to prioritize. And then the final thing, and I went out of order, but is come prepared. So let's pretend you already have a meeting set up, and this is true once you have an advisor as well. My least favorite question in the world is, can I pick your brain? Like, no, you cannot pick my brain. That makes me do all the work. Come prepared with questions. Come prepared with something you want me to help you with. I don't sit all day and think about your company. Your advisor does not sit all day and think about your company and your problems. You do. So you tell me what your priorities are. I might push back. I might say, hey, I'm not sure that seems super important, but please don't make me do all the work. Like when someone sits down with me at coffee and just says, I just want to pick your brain about this industry. Like, I don't know, it's your industry. Don't make the advisor do all the work. Come prepared. And then when you follow up with them, like follow up like you would any business meeting. Like thank them for the meeting. Here's what I'm gonna work on. Here's what I'd love to talk about in the next meeting. Awesome. If people did that to me every time, I'd be so happy and I would rave about them to other people. And it sounds so simple and people don't do it with advisors. I don't know why. So it's simple stuff and you'll look really good for doing it. Okay, I'm gonna talk equity. I wanna say this is a North American view of equity, so I don't know how it is here. Okay, co-founders. Here's what I hear all the time. I really like this person. They're kind of amazing. We work together, but they want so much more equity than I'm willing to give. And I always sort of like look at them funny when they say that, because if they're so amazing and you work really well together and you think they should be your co-founder, like how far off could you be? Like, don't be stingy. Your equity is honestly not worth anything. And the whole like 51-49 thing, like it doesn't matter. Like 5%, it honestly does not matter. We're talking about like a 7 to 10 year time horizon, and you have vesting. So if something happens, it's not like they walk away with the equity they didn't earn. The other thing is, but it's my idea. That is like the worst answer ever. And if someone says it to you, you should walk away. The idea is worth nothing, zero, zilch, nothing. It is not worthwhile, unless you have like a patent on it and some crazy technology. Just the idea, worth zero. It's going to change, and as awesome as the idea could be, 3,000 other people have it. It is not worth anything. Bringing the idea does not equal more equity. It just doesn't. And I can see people looking at me, so feel free to ask questions about that. Okay, here's the other myth. A co-founder means that you're 50-50 equity. Not true. In fact, I would advise against 50-50 at all costs. Because what 50-50 means is the buck does not stop with anyone. Someone needs to be the place where the buck stops. The final, it's just how it needs to be. Just because you have 80% and your co-founder has 20% doesn't mean they're not your co-founder. I would say 10% is about a floor, right? Like if you're giving someone 5%, that's like what a VP at a Series A company could get, or a C-level exec. So that's kind of not a co-founder. I mean, they need to be incentivized, but it doesn't mean that you're 50-50. And just because you're not 50-50 doesn't mean the person with more equity makes all decisions. That's not what it means either. So being 50-50 isn't the best way to go, and it's usually what people do because they don't want to have a hard conversation. And that's also a bad sign. If you don't want to have a hard conversation, if you don't know how to have a hard conversation with your co-founder, it's a bad sign. And if you think that you deserve more or they think they deserve more, pretty quickly this will lead to resentment, and resentment kills all productivity. It just kills relationships. It is a relationship killer. Okay. As I just said, resentment breeds failure. Okay, advisors, I think I already talked about this. Please don't keep talking to people without offering them equity as advisors. It's such a small amount. It's like token. And so you could say back to me like, okay, so why does it matter? And I think I already explained. It just shows me that you like value my time and it aligns our incentives. 0.1 to 0.3 is honestly the most common. If you give more than 0.3, they need to be a superstar. They need to like you should have some incentives in place. Like, hey, you are going to do this for us in the next 6 months.
Hi. You mentioned vesting on co-founder equity.
Yes.
Is this about bad lever clauses, or what is it exactly?
What is vesting?
Yeah, I know vesting for stock options, but on co-founder equity, I don't know how it works.
All equity should vest. Founder equity also. And if you don't have it vesting and you raise money, they'll probably reset you and make it vest. So just in case, vesting means that you're like earning your equity as you work. Again, I'm a caveat, this is how it works in the US. It's usually a 1-year cliff, which means if you leave at 11 months and 29 days, you get 0. If you leave at, 13 months, you get a quarter of the equity plus a month. So how it typically works is there's a 1-year cliff, and then you vest monthly, sometimes quarterly. And let's say you leave after 2 years, 50% of your equity goes back into the equity pool. Co-founders also. Co-founders should vest, absolutely. And what it does also is just like a safety gear in case something happens. It's like a better version of a prenup. It's simpler and everybody knows it's there and it's not weird. Okay, this is the question I get all the time. How can I be sure? Like, you can't. You can't be sure. That's the bottom line, you can't. You can tick all the boxes, you can ask all the questions, they can get an 8 out of 10, and hopefully, 100%, but I don't know how you're scoring. You can work together, you just can't. You just don't know. You never know what's gonna happen in their lives, you never know what's gonna happen with the company. You can't be sure. So at a certain point, you have to, just take a leap. So this is, I don't know if the show's big here, but it's big in San Francisco. You don't know. And it's the way I started the presentation as well. There's so much you don't know. You have to be comfortable with that. You have to be super comfortable, not knowing a lot of stuff. You have to be comfortable figuring it out also, but you have to be comfortable not knowing. You should feel good about it. This doesn't mean that you don't feel good. It's like, I hate to keep beating a dead horse, but it's like when you get married, you think it's gonna work. Of course you think it's gonna work, but a lot of things don't work. So I would say you really need to do your homework, but be comfortable with the idea that things change. And that's one of the reasons vesting is actually super important. That said, let me address one thing really quickly, and then I'll take questions. I'll let you guys think about some really good questions. So a lot of people ask or say, oh, but we're friends, so this is gonna work. We're friends. And I've been exposed to a lot of research. There's 0 evidence that being friends matters. Not at all. And in fact, what I've seen is being friends, having that relationship, often makes you ignore red flags. Because what you say is, yeah, they do that, or we're not exactly aligned on this, but we've known each other since childhood. Yeah, it turns out when you're running a company, that's not the only thing that matters. And stuff still drives you crazy, and you still fight the same way. And so you sort of try to control risk by saying you really know this person, but you've never been in this kind of environment with them. Unless you've started a company with them or they've been early on your team, there is no replica of starting a company together. Unless maybe you actually went to war together. That is potentially a good partnership. There's just no replica for it. Growing up together, that's super nice, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm not saying it doesn't help, but don't ignore things that you know are red flags just because you feel secure that you know them and they're not going to screw you. So that's the gist of it. This is a quote that has really nothing to do with Paul Graham of Y Combinator said that starting a startup is too hard for one person. Even if you could do all the work yourself, you need colleagues to brainstorm with, to talk you out of stupid decisions, and to cheer you up when things go wrong. So I hope when I was talking tonight, you realize that it's really not just about skill sets. Please don't walk up to someone and say like, oh, I'm building this and I need an engineer. That's not enough. That's not a healthy co-founder relationship, and it won't get you where you need to go. And then this is my just favorite quote. Comparison is the death of happiness. So especially when you're in environments like this, which I think are amazing, and when you're in like a bubble of tech and startups, which can be really helpful, and there's amazing people to talk to, don't compare yourself to everyone. You have a different company, you have a different thing you're trying to do, you need different things, and doing that usually leads to total unhappiness and not success. So really has nothing to do with co-founders, but I think it's important. Okay, questions?
So you advised against the 50-50 splits between co-founders.
Yes, strongly
so
advise against.
You also advise against 1/3 for free of co-founders.
I advise against even splits.
Even splits?
Yes.
And yet you say, for example, having the idea doesn't mean that you're going to have more. So how could like a conversation go between co-founders in terms of who gets more? Like, is it the time you spent in the company?
Yeah.
Because if you spent like the same amount of time,
yeah.
How would you go about this conversation?
I think it really, I mean, time spent, I guess, is one way to think about it. But I guess overall, the way I would frame it is what you're bringing to the table. And I think people have this tendency to look at what's already been done. And as I said, like, you're founding a company for the company's lifespan is 7 to 10 years. So you shouldn't only look at what already got done in like, I don't know, 3 to 6 months. That should not decide everything. So it's not totally unimportant. Like if you, for example, if you've quit your job and no one else has, I think that's important. I think that's a big thing for me. And by the way, also, if they don't quit their jobs quickly, a lot of resentment happens. We can talk about that. But so I think that's a big thing. But you need to frame it in like, well, what is this person bringing to the company going forward? Where would we be without them? Like, I would frame it almost in the negative. Like, if we lost this person, what would happen? Like, we wouldn't be able to fundraise. We wouldn't be able to get customers. We wouldn't be able to build anything. Like, I don't know. You have to frame it that way. It's not an easy conversation. And I think most people have ideas in their heads already. So I wouldn't have the conversation like day 1 or day 2, but you also shouldn't wait. Like, it's not a conversation that you have when you go to put ink to paper. That's like just to formalize what you already discussed. I wish I had a formula for you, but the best I can say is like, think about like where you would be without them. And that's also for, if you're talking about like, if it's sort of your company and you're then doling out equity, like this is where I see people get really stingy. It's like 5% or you have no one. Like those are your options. So you have to be like, yeah, I feel comfortable having no one. Like it's not, I would rather give this person 35% or have them walk. Those are like pretty binary. So you have to ask yourself how you feel about it. Also, by the way, you should not just look for a co-founder after you have oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. I can't believe I didn't talk about it. Please don't only look for a co-founder when you have an idea and you've quit your job. That is like, starting to date when you want to get pregnant. It's like, no one wants to talk to you then. You're like desperate. And you, by the way, make bad decisions because you're just looking for anyone to say yes. And so that's what made me think of it. In that situation when you're like, oh, should I give them an extra couple percent but then I'll have no one. Sometimes no one might be better because you'll find someone else. But if you're like, oh my God, I just need a co-founder. This VC said they give me money if I find a co-founder, and I'm just going to go with this person, and you rush everything through it, like you're probably making a bad decision. So like start early, do side projects with people. That's why we created the network. Did that answer your question? Okay.
What's the hardest conversation you got with your co-founder? And maybe the richest from...
Wait, sorry, say that again?
What's the hardest conversation?
What's the hardest conversation I had with my co-founder? Well, when we broke up, that was the hardest conversation. Like a year, we started as a side project, and like a fair bit into it, he was holding me back. And so I said, like, I'm gonna do this, and you're holding me back. What do you want to do? And it was awkward, and honestly, the equity conversation that came out of that was super hard, but it was 100% the right decision. No question. Like, if someone is holding you back, like, especially, and by that I mean like speed. I couldn't move as fast because I was waiting on him to make decisions, answer emails, blah, blah, blah. As I already said, time is your greatest resource. You don't have money. You're not smarter than everyone. You don't have a huge team. So if you feel like someone is holding you back from getting stuff done quickly or correctly, then you need to have a conversation. It was awkward, but now we're great.
I have questions regarding contributors that are not working full-time. To give you some background, so I work on a startup working in the agriculture space.
Oh, you're luck.
And I partner, there's another one there. And I partner with a farmer. We've been working together for 4 months, so he still works as a farmer.
Yeah.
But the reason we work together is he developed a tool to help farmers better manage their farms. He works it on Excel, Microsoft Excel.
Wow.
We put it online. The question is 64, so he's not going to turn full-time working on a startup. He's interested in being involved. How do you manage this kind of relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question. By the way, at 64, you could be full-time involved. There's nothing, let's not be ageist. But I can understand that he might not want to leave his farm. So I think there's a couple questions that's like, it really, I know that the answer, it depends, is very unfulfilling / sucks. But it depends. It depends what kind of involvement he wants to have going forward and that you want him to have. Like, there are people who are involved early who, as I just recounted, don't help going forward. So in that case, you should make them feel whole for what they've done and maybe make them an advisor because it doesn't cost you anything. And how should I say this? It's not good to burn bridges, even in the moment when you're mad, and I know you're not. But so with him, I think the question is like, what kind of role does he want going forward? And I could imagine, I'm making this up, I know nothing about agriculture and ag tech, but I could imagine that like having him there, having him introduce you to other farmers, giving his story. I'm sure there's a PR aspect to it. Having him involved in some way going forward is super important. And then, so it's a conversation. A, what does he want to do? And what do you want to do? B, how much time is that? Like, is that an hour a week? Is that 5 hours a week? And by the way, I don't mean that in a sense of like he's going to punch a time card, because that's like very demotivating in my mind. But just to have a range to understand, right? And then you can back into it and say, okay, and also what kind of compensation is valuable to them and can you give? If you can't give cash, like, then you shouldn't be having a cash conversation. If he wants equity and you want to give cash, it's a separate conversation. So it's, what do they want to do and what do you want them to do? You got to align on that first and make sure it's valuable to the company. I'll give you just a quick example. I have a super close friend whose co-founder left and came back, which is a separate awful thing that I just don't think should happen. And the company is 30 people, and he wanted to be the chief strategy officer. That's like not a role at a company with 30 people. if someone came to me and said, I want to be chief strategy officer at a 30-person company, I'd say, great. We all do that from 7 to 10 at night. What do you want to do during the day? So you need to make sure that whatever he wants to do is also important, that he feels motivated to do it through the compensation that you're giving, and that, you know, and that you can give it. You don't want to like bet the company on it. I think typically with things like that, where you want them, and this is an assumption I'm making, where you do want them to have an ongoing role, you need to give some equity. And it should vest. But the way I always do it with people, if like we started off together and we never had this conversation, is, what month is it? It's October. Let's pretend you started together in July and you only formalize it in October. I'll start vesting them in July. I think that's a fair and right thing to do, and it costs nothing and people really appreciate it. So it depends, but there's some cash equity component to it, but you really want to agree on responsibilities. I think that's most important.
So according to what you said before, I may be in the worst case scenario, meaning I already have an idea, starting to work on my project.
Yeah.
But I have no partner for the moment.
Yeah.
So my question is maybe in two parts. So A, is it better to be alone? Better off being alone than, you know, having a kind of a bad partner? And B, how can you find a partner, and what kind of work you can do together, with jobs or projects you can do together to be able to, you know, make sure it's the right partner?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the question was, if you already have an idea and you've started working on it, are you working on it full time? And you're working on it full time, how can you figure out, like, if you find someone, how do you work together? And I guess the first part was actually, should you even look for someone? Yeah, you need to, like, it's never better to be alone unless it's with the wrong person. I mean, I don't know, it's like life. But yeah, it'd be better to have someone, is the quick answer, for all the reasons that we just discussed, summarized in PG's quote. It's really hard. And honestly, you don't realize how hard it is until you're out of it, but trust me. So it'd be better to find someone. I didn't say you're in worst case scenario, I just said try not to do that. You know, you should spend a lot of time and energy on it, I think. And like, when you're looking for someone, it should be top priority. And you can only have 1 or 2 top priorities. So you need to spend a lot of time on it through your network, you know, through events, through our network. Like, you should be having a lot of coffees. You should be talking to a lot of people. If you have a company, if you are working on something, that should be the thing that you work on. You shouldn't, A, waste your time working on something else, and B, like, try to contrive something when you already have something that is taking up your mind space. So you should try to work on that. One way to do it, if you get to a point where you're like, okay, let's try and work on this together, is carve out something sort of as a project that you guys can try to get to, some endpoint. And you'll know pretty quickly. Like, are they delivering stuff? Are you working well together? Are they canceling meetings? So the second one is very simple. If you have a company, you should be working on that. No side projects.
My question is about number of co-founders. You insisted a lot in the fact that you need to have a personal fit with the co-founder, which is almost a professional crush. Do you think there's an ideal number of, even a limit in the number of crushes?
Yes.
Would you recommend the number of co-founders? And the second question, do you think there's a limit of time after which you shouldn't include any new co-founder?
I think, generally speaking, people love rules, and I don't love rules. But I do think there's a limit on the number of people, just because, you know, there's a saying, too many cooks in the kitchen. It's just really hard to make everyone feel whole and like stay. I've never seen more than 3 work in any consistent way. Meaning, a company may have started with more than 3, but people sort of quickly left. And I think what happens is you quickly sort of figure out who's more committed, who's actually giving more. You know, it's hard to have like a real division of responsibilities with more than that. Yeah, so my personal opinion is 2 to 3. I've never had 3, so I can't say, but 3 is also a very hard number. Usually someone feels ganged up on, or like someone's against them, or 2 against 1. But look, if there were a recipe, everybody would follow it and be successful. It's not one thing, and there's not hard and fast rules. Is there a moment in time, the second part was, is there a moment in time where like it's too late to add co-founders? Yes, but I don't have a rule about what it is. Sort of like you just know. I think after a certain number of employees, although, and maybe this is a bad example given the recent news, but Zenefits, you guys know Zenefits? Okay, it's an app in the benefit space, like HR benefits. It was sort of like a darling of Silicon Valley, and it has since lost its luster. But anyway, the founder brought in a COO named David Sachs, who was big at PayPal, started another company, sold it to Microsoft, etc., who was the COO, but he sort of became a co-founder. He just didn't have that title. So there's always exceptions to every rule. I think that once you raise a significant seed round, and if you already have 2 co-founders, unless that person is going to make a serious impact on the trajectory of your company, that they're probably not a co-founder at that point. But I don't know. Rules are made to be broken.
Okay, so I have recently started a startup with someone, like a project, and we've been working on it for a few months now.
Awesome.
And I like working with him. He's great. Okay. But as kind of what you were saying before, he's kind of holding it back and not really doing the work that I was hoping that he would do.
That's called a friend.
Well, no, well, not.
I mean, if you like him but he's not doing work, that's not a...
Well, I guess, sure. But anyway, so at what point, would it be a bad idea to try and replace him at this point, or?
I don't know what point you're at.
I mean, we've been working on it for 6 months, and I'm bringing in an investor, and I've kind of been doing everything on the business side.
I think you should replace him immediately.
Okay, that's
I can just tell from your body language that you're hesitant and I mean, imagine going into the next stage of a serious relationship feeling like that.
Yeah.
So replace him is the wrong advice. I would have a conversation with him immediately. And this is what I'm talking about. It's uncomfortable. You can tell from how even she said it, it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable conversation. She likes him. He's a nice person, but he's not doing work. It's an uncomfortable conversation, just like having a conversation with your co-founders about why you deserve more equity is uncomfortable. If you can't have it, though, you can't work together for the next 5 to 10 years. So you need to figure out how to have it in a way that resonates with them. Maybe something, I jumped the gun when I said replace them immediately, but you need to have a conversation immediately, before you bring in investors. And the conversation should start off, I really like working with you. I think you could be great if you think that. I can't even tell. And we're about to jump to the next level, but I don't feel like you're committed. What's going on? I, by the way, used to be really quick to judge, right? If someone doesn't email me back, I'd be why didn't you email me back? And now, instead of doing that, I'll say things like, is everything okay? Much less, puts people much less on the defense. So let them tell you what's going on. Don't tell them something's going on. Just say, you're feeling a certain way, and you want to know what's going on with them. But you cannot go raise money and feel like that. Because, by the way, it'll come off to the investors, and then as soon as you raise money, someone once told me this, and it's always stuck with me, the clock starts. As soon as you raise money, the clock starts. So when you raise money, you have to spend a lot of that time finding a new co-founder. Look, shit happens. You can handle it. But if you know that going in, it's different. It's it's a known instead of a known unknown.
how do you make a breakup work? I mean, how do you push away a co-founder that has been working with you for a long time? How do you make that person go away if you feel you need to?
Yeah, I don't know.
Should you give this person some incentives? Should you
incentives to leave?
some incentives, some compensation?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, well, first of all, I guess so. General thoughts in life are you don't want to burn bridges, even if this person's been an ass. I think the world is really small, and like you should have the discipline, and I really mean it. You should have the discipline to say to yourself, am I going to feel good about this when I look in the mirror in a year? Not tomorrow, because tomorrow you're still kind of probably angry or pissed or resentful. In a year, like the company's going to be doing great, and there's no reason to like burn bridges, have someone out there talking bad about you, etc. So yeah, you should be fair and compensate them. Look, the typical thing for how things work is that someone leaves, they get the equity that's vested. I think it's a little more complicated if they leave before a year, which is a separate side conversation. But they get the equity that's vested and they become an advisor. And they probably get a little more than the average advisor. And honestly, in that case, you shouldn't care if they're just a like perfunctory advisor who has equity. It's just an incentive to stay nice, stay friendly, etc. But honestly, that's the easy part of a breakup. Like that's like saying here's a check, and it just doesn't make people. It makes people feel a little better, but there's like a whole emotional process to manage, and those are very specific. But you know, I think again, you need to have conversations earlier rather than later. Like as soon as you think something's wrong, and I personally am bad at this, you need to have a conversation. Not a conversation like you should leave, but what's going on. Yeah, they're hard. It sucks.
Hi, my name is Alex Kirgianakis. I'm the CEO of Enloop. It's a location sharing social app, and Loop with double P. The reason I'm asking you about the vesting is because we're trying to raise seed financing now. Mm-hmm. And you said before that even the co-founders who already have co-founder equity and who have invested their own money at the beginning are going to, it's going to be one of the demands of investors to vest over a period of time. Yeah. How does this work? Because, I mean, I'm here in Paris to build a local team for Enloop, and clearly the local teams, they will vest over the next year quarterly and get their 5 to 7% over time based on milestones. But what about the co-founders like me and my other two co-founders in Berlin?
You're saying you guys don't vest? You just have a chunk of equity?
Yes.
Oh.
Because we invested our own capital at the beginning, and maybe we're based in Berlin, so maybe the GmbH structure in Berlin is a bit different.
Yeah.
But my question is, how would an investor demand us to vest? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
So I think everyone heard the question, but it's like if you have a co-founder team and you guys aren't vesting, and how could the investor tell you need to vest? The investor can tell you whatever they want. That's the bottom line. You can say no, and then they can decide if they want to give you your money. But like investors can do a lot of stuff. They can change a lot of things. When you get bought, the acquirer can do a lot of stuff. They can change a lot of things. They can say, yeah, oh yeah, you guys had that preference. No, we're not honoring it. So, it's only as good as the next set of people that have to be affected by it. I'll plead the fifth on GmbH structures and that kind of stuff. I have no idea. But look, an investor wants to de-risk something. And let's pretend you have 3 people and you are a third, just for the sake of like back of the envelope math. and an investor says, oh, you guys are great, blah, 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 but like, what if someone leaves tomorrow? And you say, no one's gonna leave, we're really committed. Okay, but like, an investor is a pattern matcher. He's seen teams before, someone leaves all the time, it's not that rare. And he wants a backstop, and by the way, so should you. You should want one also. And so they're gonna say, he or she, by the way, is gonna say like, you guys need to vest. And I'm gonna give you money only if you vest. Like this company I'm advising now, they have kind of a screwed up cap table. There's investors that have said to them like, we like you, we love the idea, love the traction, but you have to fix your cap table if you want us to invest. Honestly, investors can say whatever they want. You can then decide if you want to do it. Those change anyway when you get a board. Those change when you get a board anyway. So just because you're vesting vesting shouldn't affect voting rights.
How did you divide the responsibilities? More, the skills more than the willingness, or the willingness more than the skills?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first of all, if someone has a skill and the other person doesn't, I mean, the person with the skills should do it. I think it's a question, it's only a difficult question if you both have the skill or if neither of you have it. The way I look at it is like, it's a problem when neither of you have the skill and neither of you have the willingness, or you both have the skill and you both have the willingness, right? I mean, I'm picturing like a 2x2 in my head, but so if you both have the skill and you both have the willingness, I think it's just a question of, you know, having, these are what I mean by having disagreements, by the way. Like, these are the things you need to figure out. If you both have the skill and you both have the willingness and the skill is equal, I would go with the willingness. But you sort of have to decide. Everybody thinks they're the best at everything. Be humble. Everything is about the company. It's not about you, right? Like if someone can do a better job or you have too much on your plate, let someone else do it. Like it's just more important that it get done. So that should be, I mean, that's where there's a conflict, but the framework should be, how are we going to get this done as fast as possible with the best result? And balance that out with the other things that need to be done. So if you have 8 things to do and your co-founder has 4 and you're about the same at something, or neither of you know how to do it, then the person with 4 should do it. I mean, so I guess the z-axis would be what else you have to do. These are not, I know everyone wants rules. They're not rules, they're conversations with your co-founder. That's what makes the relationship so important. Thank you guys so much.
Que la famille.